As you guys probably know, Slash's appetite for destruction sound is really hard to recreate. We're going to look at how we can recreate that today. So first, looking at the amp, Slash used a modified Marshall 1959T Super Lead. Given that that's a Plexi amp, we're going to choose the Brit Plexi 100 Bright. This is a super gainy sound, so we're going to set the gain to 10. We're going to set the bass to 3.2 to make room for the real bass and to de-muddy the guitar sound. We're going to set the mids to 7.5 to push it forward in the mix. Treble is going to be 5.3. And presence is going to be 5.5. And we're going to set the output to 12. We're also going to assign the gain and the output to scenes so that we can change them in the solo and the little section before the solo. We're going to pair that amp with the 412 Bogner Uber T75 2000s. The position on the SM57 mic is going to be 2.1 and the distance is going to be 1.6. We're going to change the ribbon 160 position to 1.8 and the distance to 1.7. And then we're going to push the output volume a little bit to 0.9. And let's give that a quick listen to see how it sounds so far. As you can see, we still have quite a long way to go. The next thing we're going to do is add the Myth Drive pedal, which is the Klon Centaur. The Klon Centaur is considered like a tone sweetener, always on overdrive pedal. It's used on John Mayer's Gravity. A lot of guitar players like to leave it in front of the amp and just always on. Slash isn't known to have used this on Sweet Child of Mine, but it helped me get closer to his sound. We're going to set the gain to 4.7, the treble to 7.4, and the level to 4.3. And we'll hear what that sounds like now. Next, we're going to add some reverb with the Cave reverb. This isn't a real pedal, this is just a digital neural DSP model. We're going to set the mix at 55.5 and the decay at 7.02. And then everything else is default on this block. And let's hear how that sounds. So yeah, we're starting to get a little closer, almost there. We've got a few more things to do to really nail it down. So next, in the effects loop between the amp and the cab, we're going to add a Parametric 3 EQ block. This is just going to add some high frequencies at 6 dB at 10.87 on frequency. The reason I'd use this over the amp EQ is just sometimes it's nice to be able to pick exactly what frequencies you're bringing up and down, because on the amp you can't decide what frequencies are adjusted, so you can be more specific with an EQ block. Let's listen to how that sounds now. So yeah, now it's starting to sound a little closer. And just taking one step back, guys, I forgot to say that on the reverb, we add the mix parameter to the scenes so that we can adjust that per scene. The next block we need to add is the transpose block. If you like, you can just tune the guitar down. It is down 1 semitone. I like the block because I like the consistent tension on my strings, but if you're less lazy than me, you can just tune down. Some people don't like using a transpose block because unless you're playing with headphones, you know, you can hear your real strings clashing off the speaker and it just doesn't sound good. Some people feel a little bit of latency as well and just think that it doesn't feel as good in the hands to play. I personally don't mind it with headphones on, so I'm happy to use the transpose block. I prefer my strings to feel a consistent tension. And then the last block on the dirty channel we're going to add is the Crying Clyde wah. This is going to be off, and we're going to assign the off-on switch to scenes so we can turn it on in the solo. So now let's have a look at the input block. We're going to turn on the noise reduction feature. We're going to assign this parameter to scenes. We're going to turn it up a little bit to 34.5 because this patch is super gainy on the dirty channel and you're going to be making a lot of noise, unwanted noise, unless you turn this on. And then looking at the output block, we're going to set the gain, the volume I should say, to minus 10.5 and the pan centered, and both of these are going to be assigned to the scenes because we're also going to adjust this per scene. And let's have a listen to how that sounds now. So there we go, that's the dirty channel set up as a starting point. Next we're going to look at the clean sound. So we're going to enable this input here, and then we're going to enable this output. And this is just going to give us another channel to play with. We're going to move the scene selector over to B, and then we're going to turn the output of our dirty amp off, because we obviously don't want this dirty amp playing when we're trying to do the clean verse. For the clean amp that was used on Sweet Child of Mine, I couldn't find consistent information online. I was reading on some places that it was a Roland Jazz Chorus 120. I was reading on other places that it was just the same amp, but with the volume turned down. So because I couldn't get anything consistent, I just had to take my own guesses. I went for the Brit 900 clean with the gain set to 3.7, The bass set to 0, because if you listen to the verses on Sweet Child of Mine, it's a very thin and brittle sound. The mids, treble, and presence are all dimed. The master output and the output are mostly up, with the output being 10.7. We're also going to assign the output on the clean amp to the scenes so that we can turn it off on scene A and pretty much all the other scenes that we're going to use, which is C is the pre-solo and D is the solo itself. Be sure to set this back to B so that we can keep working on the clean scene. Some famous songs this amp was used on would be Wonderwall by Oasis, Basket Case by Green Day, and Creep by Radiohead. For the cab that we're going to pair with the clean amp, we're going to use the US 212 Twin CK2. For the position on the SM57 mic, we're going to set 1.2. We're going to set the distance to 2.0. And then on the Ribbon 160, we're going to set the position to 1.3 and the distance to 1.9. Between the amp and the cab, we're going to leave 3 blocks for the effects loop. And the first thing we're going to add is a compressor, which is the VCA Comp M mono. In real life, this is a studio rack compressor. You know, you'd record the amp with the mic and then that would go into the studio gear. Then you might compress something there. So this isn't really how you'd use this in real life, but it's a nice compressor and who cares? We're going to set the threshold to minus 12.5, the ratio to 4.08, and we want it to react fast as possible. We don't want that kind of pumped, slow compression sound. So we're going to minimize the 2 of these parameters, and then we're going to set the makeup gain to minus 11.1. And now we'll have a quick listen to how that sounds. Next, we're going to add another bit of drastic EQ with the parametric 3. We are going to do a high pass on the first parameter. I'm going to set the frequency to 398 Hertz. And on the second parameter, we're going to set the gain to 8.2 and the frequency to 969 gigahertz Hertz. And then on the third parameter, we're going to set the gain to 12 decibels, the frequency to 1296 frequency hertz. Oh, and back to parameter 2 for a sec. The EQ on that should be 1.29. The last block in the effects loop is going to be a Dream Chorus stereo. We're going to set the mix to 77% and everything else on this block is default. After the speaker, we're going to do the Cave reverb and we're going to set the mix to 27.3 and everything else will be default on that as well. And then same as before with the transpose, if we're too lazy to retune, we can just copy this down here. And then looking at the input block, we're just going to make a micro adjustment to minus 3.2 just to hit that amp a little bit less hard. And we want on the output block, volume 0, and we want to pan to the right. Slash is pan to the right on this song, Izzy's pan to the left. And now we'll have a quick listen to how that sounds. And that's everything on the clean scene. Next, we're going to look at the short section before the solo where Slash joins Izzy on the kind of rhythm guitar. And like we mentioned before, just double check that when we go to scene C that the output of the clean amp is off so that we don't get that bleeding into the dirty channel. On the input block on scene C, we've got the noise reduction at 34.5. On the amp, we set the gain to 6 and the output to 12. On the reverb, we reduce the mix to 35%. And then on the output, we have the volume set at minus 9.6 and we pan off to the right at 25. And we can hear how that sounds now. Finally on the solo on scene D, we're going to look at the input block. The noise reduction should be set to 6.3 so we don't choke out the long bent sustained kind of notes. We're going to enable the wah. On the amp we're going to have the gain and the output at 10 and 12. The reverb we're going to set the mix at 55.5 and then the output volume is going to be minus 8.9. And we're just going to make sure that we're back in the center unlike scenes B and C. And we'll hear how that sounds now. If you enjoyed rebuilding this together, guys, I've also got Hot for Teacher by Van Halen and Cowboys from Hell from Pantera. If you've got any suggestions, please let me know in the comments. And yep, cheers.